If there was one game series that embodied my time growing up with Nintendo, it'd be the new Super Mario Bros. Sub-series, which, let's be real, isn't necessarily new anymore. It's a series that practically everyone has played, whether they own the games or not, and I know a lot of you would have read the title of this video and thought, psh, come on man, the new Super Mario Bros. Games aren't hard. And look, I agree with you. Like many of you, I assume the new Super Mario Bros. Games, much like the Mario Party or Mario Kart series, were a set of games that I look back on fondly as some light-hearted fun. Whether I was playing the games late at night on my DS or with a group of friends on the weekends, I never really considered them challenging and thought of them more so as a casual party experience. That being said, I was recently reminiscing about those joyful memories when I realized that there was something that I had never achieved when playing them as a kid. I never did get all those sexy golden stars on my save files. Each of these stars is earned by completing certain objectives, and collecting them all meant that you had 100%ed the game. With that in mind, I thought it would be a fun little challenge to see which of these games truly was the hardest to 100%. What transpired over the next month or so can only be described as one of the most frustrating gaming experiences I've had this year. Shit. Piss off. Come on. Please. Fuck. Dude. Fuck's sake. Wow. Dude. Bullshit. These games suck. Now, in order to rank these games from easiest to hardest, I played through all of them to the point of 100%ing them. While doing so, I noted down every death that I had and divided this number by the number of levels in each of the games. This gives us an average deaths per level statistic and helps account for the latter games having more levels. This discrepancy could have in theory skewed the data, as more levels means more chances to die. But with that out of the way, let's venture on over to the game which kickstarted this not so new sub-series. First, let's set out what exactly is required to 100% new Super Mario Bros. This game includes 3 golden stars. The first is achieved by completing the main game. Simple enough, right? Well, to collect the other 2, we have to not only clear all 80 levels as well as find all 17 secret passages, but we also have to collect every star coin in each of these levels and spend all of them. With our goals set, let's go rescue our beloved princess, shall we? As is customary in 2D Mario games, our adventures start in a grass world that acts as a tutorial stage. The levels here are elementary and therefore feature basic enemy types like the Goomba and Koopa Troopers. These enemies are so brain dead that they willingly walk to their own deaths. Now, despite this being a beginner world, it does in fact introduce quite a few things. World 1-1, for example, introduces the Mega Mushroom, while 1-4 and the Toad Houses introduce the Mini Mushroom and the Blue Shell respectively. The Mega Mushroom, while fun to use, is pretty useless in our quest for 100%. The Mini Mushroom and Blue Shell, on the other hand, will both become increasingly important as they are required to reach very specific star coins. There are also multiple red flag exits which are hidden from the player and require specific power-ups like the Blue Shell in order to reach. As you can imagine, these secret exits are harder to reach as they offer a unique challenge in order to assess players' control of Mario and his movements. That being said, I can't say any of the ones offered in World 1 are particularly challenging to find or reach. The star coins are in a similar boat. They're either just out there in the open begging to be collected, or are hidden, and I use that term very loosely as the spots that are hidden in couldn't be more obvious. World 1-Tower, as discussed, includes the secret exit accessible via the Blue Shell, but it also introduces the mini-boss of this game, Bowser Jr. Now, in the time that I read out that sentence, he's already been clapped. The Fire Flower power-up makes this boss fight a complete cakewalk. Now, the only level that may cause some problems in this first world is World 1-A, and that's purely because it introduces Mario's worst enemy, water. There's nothing worse than stripping away Mario's ability to jump, only to then replace it with floaty physics and awkward enemy types. Whining aside, I did manage to work my way to the first castle stage without dying, and it's here where we face off against Bowser. This fight pays homage to the original games and is therefore extremely easy, requiring us to simply run under Bowser when he jumps. By this point, I had died a total of 0 times and was feeling pretty good going into World 2. World 2 switches out the grasslands for a desert theme, and while it starts off easy, it does start to up the challenge in numerous ways. For one, the enemies encountered here are more complex in design and require different strategies to defeat them. Whereas the majority of the enemies in World 1 could be defeated by simply bouncing on their heads, you're better off avoiding foes like the spiny and fire snakes completely, as they require more complex methods to defeat them. Now, that may sound simple, but enemies like Lakitu, the block hoppers, and and even the fire snakes have much more erratic movement patterns which are far faster and harder to predict than your standard enemy types. This increases the likelihood that you'll be hit by them and offers a decent increase in difficulty overall. In a similar manner, the levels themselves were designed in a way to progressively increase the difficulty. Levels in World 2 feature rotating platforms that you can't jump through, as well as auto-scroller sections, all of which test the player's timing, reaction speed, and patience. Star coins also become much harder to find, oftentimes requiring you to sink through the quicksand or swim underneath the ground to reach them. Pair this with more secret exits that require the use of Mini Mario and water levels that have you hunted down by Jaws wannabe, and the difference in difficulty between the first two worlds is night and day. That being said, I still hadn't died a single time going into the second castle level, but that was about to change. The level itself is fairly simple and just requires you to avoid these spiked balls before facing off against Mummy Pokey. This boss, while more complex in its movement patterns, isn't necessarily hard to beat. Defeating him grants us access to World 3. But hold on, if we rewind just a little bit, you may have noticed a little branching path underneath this sign leading to World 4. This is also portrayed on the minimap on the bottom screen, which reveals there are two paths out of World 2. In order to reach World 4, we have to beat Mummy Pokey in our Mini Mario form. In this form, Mario can jump higher, run on water, and falls at a slower speed. Unfortunately though, he can't stomp on enemies, meaning we have to time multiple ground pounds instead. Not only that, but any damage taken in this form immediately results in an instant death, which is brutal when considering the hitboxes on this lanky enemy. So yeah, I may have died once, or twice. Okay, now it's just getting embarrassing. But we did eventually gain access to World 4. But before we venture into World 4, let's quickly discuss World 3. It's easy. Now, World 4 is interesting. I'm only joking, guys. Now, despite World 3 taking place on a beach with numerous water levels, the stages here hardly gave me any trouble at all. Underwater levels in general are fairly plain, which is most likely due to the limiting nature of Mario's movement options while in the water. This results in some very easy star coins, as there is pretty much no way to place them in locations that require platforming skills, because you're underwater. This world does introduce the first ghost house level though, but these are more so puzzle stages with lots of hidden elements. I wouldn't necessarily call them dangerous or challenging, at least not at the moment. World 3 just doesn't have too much to offer in terms of difficulty, and after clapping Cheap Skipper in the castle, we can make our way on over to World 4. Now it's around this point where I'd say the game starts to up the difficulty to a certain degree. Players have to start taking more risks to reach star coins like wall jumping or using bomb enemies to destroy blocks that cover the entry pipes. Due to these jungle levels having an insta-kill mechanic, I did perish a few times during the earlier levels. This continued on into the tower stage that has lava rising at a constant rate. The star coins in this stage are located off the beaten path, meaning you have to be extremely quick in order to outpace the rising lava. Bowser Jr. also learns a few new tricks this time around, as he likes to bait you into jumping on top of him early, only to then retreat into his shell. This guy is a complete joke if you have the fire flower, but in this case I didn't, and he humbled me. The stages to follow though aren't too hard. The Wiggler enemies are simple, and while the ghost house has a few confusing elements, you're never really in any danger as the boos can't even bear to look at your face. I will say that it's somewhat annoying that you need to be Mini Mario to reach the third star coin, especially because the level itself doesn't actually include a mini mushroom. This meant that I had to go back to World 1-4 to grab the mini mushroom before traveling back to the ghost house to get the third star coin. The final boss fight is against a massive Goomba, but after a few ground pounds he's down, granting us access to World 5. This world continues to up the challenge, now featuring ice physics that have you sliding all over the place, snow that slows your movements as you sink into it, as well as annoying snow spikes that rush towards you as you're sliding all over the place. The majority of my deaths in this world, however, came at the hands of these spiked balls in the tower level. The level is an auto-scroller that sees you being stuck on a single rising platform as numerous spiked balls knock about alongside you. This requires absolute concentration from the player, as these spiked balls bounce off of one another, redirecting the direction they move in. World 5-B requires us to be Mario in order to reach its secret exit. But the problem with that is this game doesn't have a dedicated spawn for the blue shell power-up. You either have to get it out of the toad houses, roulette blocks, or the red-winged boxes. Thankfully, World 3-Cannon has a roulette block that you just have to time to get the blue shell. Continuing on, we arrive at World 5-Castle, which has the single hardest jump we've encountered so far. Dude, why can't I get up here? Surely I'm not the only one that struggles with this. Don't lie to me. Everyone struggled on this jump. It can't just be me. At the end of this castle, we confront P.T. Piranha before letting him do himself in as we move on to World 6. This world marks the largest spike in difficulty this game has to offer. World 6-A sees us running from numerous Lakachus, and World 6-5 has us being hunted down by countless deep cheeps who love to just home in on you while you're being sucked into whirlpools. It's as if the developers ran out of ways to naturally increase the game's difficulty and just thought, fuck it, let's just overwhelm the player with enemies and watch them tilt. Well, I wasn't about to let them watch me crumble.
Why are you fucking coming from behind me, fish?
The worst part is I haven't even mentioned the hardest section in this world. World 6 is the first one to introduce 2 tower stages, and it's in the very first one where I was stumped for a good while. The level itself has you climbing up it while multiple skewers thrust in and out. On its own, the level is relatively easy, and Bowser Jr., as we've discussed, gets obliterated by the Fire Flower. But here's the thing, we're not simply trying to get through the game, we're looking to 100% it, meaning we have to acquire every star coin. And the third star coin in this level has to be one of the most frustrating to collect. This level doesn't have any mini mushroom spawns, so we'll have to find it in the Toad House or another level. The problem is, the floaty nature of Mini Mario doesn't help when you have to quickly jump across multiple platforms. I tried a good few times, but it almost seems impossible to avoid this set of skewers while in this form. So instead, we'll have to hold the mini mushroom in our spare item slot and make our way to the room in which we're required to use it. So here I was, on my 4th attempt, trying to get the star coin after having spent 15 minutes going back and forth collecting the stupid mini mushroom power up. I did eventually grab the star coin, but we still have to beat Bowser Jr. This means that we can't make a single mistake, and have to time multiple ground pounds on him as he's dashing under us. Now I'm not ashamed to admit that my palms were indeed getting sweaty during this admittedly simple fight. Thankfully I didn't fold under the pressure and we were able to move on to the castle level, which was much easier. We took out the Monty Mole tank and moved on to World 7. Now World 7 is an interesting one. You'd expect it to be slightly harder than World 6, right? But honestly, I don't have a lot to say about it. Even my notes for this world just say it's kind of easy, and that I played like ass during it, which, I mean, I could have said that about most of the world so far. Apparently I died to this floating block once, which funnily enough you actually need to ride in order to reach a star coin. I also died a few times during the castle level, which I do remember being somewhat challenging, purely because it has you riding these snake blocks for most of it. These are more difficult auto scrolls as you need to keep up with the snake blocks while avoiding spiked balls as you grab each of the star coins when they appear. They aren't hidden by any means, in fact the third star coin, which caused quite a few deaths, is very obviously placed at the end of the level. Now what you're supposed to do is wait for the snake blocks to drop one by one before quickly jumping from the last one to collect the star coin. But if you're a dumbass like me, you'll be there trying to do some weird wall jumps or whatever the fuck this was supposed to be. But thankfully, the final fight against Lucky Thunder isn't too bad. And with that, we've reached the final world and the ultimate challenge as far as I'm concerned. This world wastes no time letting you know that it means business, with the first level throwing the whole kitchen sink at you. You've got birds swooping in on your ass, bullet bills soaring across the screen, and even random boos that must have gotten lost along the way. This level is only the beginning though, as World 8 contains the 2 hardest levels in the entire game, and funnily enough they're frustrating for all the same reasons. They both have a constant stream of enemies or rocks that rain down on you from off screen, meaning you'll likely jump into them without even realizing. They also require you to be Mini Mario to collect a star coin. Now, I cannot explain to you just how frustrating it is to shift into Mini Mario over and over just to get hit at the last second by enemies that constantly drop down on your ass.
Wait, what? How does that kill me? I'm on his fucking head.
This level, just like the majority, doesn't have a mini mushroom spawn, so you have to go back out and find one and then come back in just to weave through endless hordes of spiders who have awkward hitboxes all without getting touched a single time just to gain access to the star coin room. World 8-8 employs the same idea, but instead of spiders, it's a constant stream of volcanic rocks raining down on you. Not only that, but you need to avoid them as they destroy the bricks which cover the pipe to a star coin. These rocks can also hit and trigger the kabombs, causing them to dash across the screen at light speeds. The fact that you have to do all of this as Mini Mario demands a degree of perfection that beat my ass a staggering number of times. The game finishes off with one final castle stage which features P-switches that rotate the level itself. This turns the level into a maze and makes finding all 3 star coins fairly challenging, especially with all the obstacles in the way. The castle ends with us facing off against the dynamic duo in Bowser and Bowser Jr. Now this isn't a hard fight, but it can catch you off guard if you're not paying particular attention to Bowser's fireballs in the background. After another try or two, I managed to beat them down and finish the game. After the credits rolled, I was greeted to 2 golden stars on my save file. If you remember back to the start of this segment, we needed 3 to signal that we had 100%ed the game. Thankfully, all I had to do to get it was buy this last path to a Toad House, as well as spend the remaining star coins at the blue Toad House. Doing so gave us that illustrious final star, meaning we had officially 100%ed New Super Mario Bros. At the end of it all, I had died a total of 55 times. If we divide this by the 80 levels present in the game, we get a humble 0.69 deaths per level. Whether or not this is a high or low number, we'll just have to see as we move to the home consoles and New Super Mario Bros. Wii. This was the very first New Super Mario Bros. Game I played, and is probably the one I'm most familiar with. That being said, I have never 100% completed it, and from memory I don't think I even attempted the game's hardest challenge. To 100% this game, we'll have to complete 5 different objectives. These include beating the game, completing every normal level, collecting all 207 star coins in the first 8 worlds, as well as the 24 star coins in World 9. Finally, we'll have to find every secret exit and use every warp cannon. Doing so awards us with 5 golden stars on our save file. Beautiful, isn't it? Unfortunately, we have our work cut out for us, as this game unexpectedly became one of the most frustrating experiences I've had in a while. We start our adventures in Princess Peach's Kingdom, which is this game's iteration of the grass-based tutorial world. As we'll come to see throughout this video, these games are very derivative of their predecessors. From the first world level introducing basic enemies like the Goomba and Koopa Troopers, to the second level always taking place underground while introducing the piranha plants. These design choices can be traced back to the original games as well, so it shouldn't come as a surprise when I say that this first world is extremely easy. Now, despite the derivative elements, there are quite a few new additions introduced in this world. World 1-1 introduces the most broken power-up in the game, the propeller suit, while World 1-2 and 1-3 introduce the Ice Flower and Yoshi respectively. These power-ups have far more utility behind them than older power-ups, and while this may sound like a net positive, it also allows for far more challenging platform sequences, which we'll cover later on. For now, let's venture into the first tower stage of the game, where we come face to face with this game's bosses, the Koopalings. Each world features a different Koopaling as its tower and castle bosses, which I think is an improvement over Bowser Jr. Each Koopaling has their own unique style of fighting, and while Larry here isn't challenging at all, it does keep the player on their toes as each fight brings something new to the table. These fights are further enhanced during our rematches as they're warped in specific ways to make the Koopalings harder to predict or time. Unfortunately for Larry, he's the first boss of the game, so he's not meant to be overwhelmingly difficult. Just like I had done in the previous game, I blew through Princess Peach's Kingdom without much trouble at all. From here we move on to the next world, which takes place in the desert. I told you these games were derivative. In fact, they're so derivative that even my dogshit plays from the previous game started to carry on over into this game, as I once again experienced my first death in the second world. I will say that the difficulty increase between the first 2 worlds is far more apparent in this game than its predecessor. The game introduces more annoying enemy types, but the real challenge is collecting the star coins in these stages. Some are hidden in peculiar spots like underneath this quicksand, or require you to avoid an onslaught of fireballs as you carefully make your way through the pitch black. Certain star coins are impossible to obtain unless you have a respective power up, but thankfully this isn't much of a hassle as the levels themselves will always offer that particular power up. The tower levels also up the ante by having Roy constantly shoot fireballs at you throughout your ascent, which not only keeps you on your toes, but is an extra element you have to pay attention to as you avoid the other obstacles present. Overall, while I don't consider this world to be all that challenging, I do think it provides a solid step up in difficulty as I perished 2 times during my playthrough of it. No, your eyes don't deceive you. The third world in this game is the frozen world as opposed to the beach theme in the original. That being said, all the telltales of your typical snow world are here. Slippery physics, which can only mean one thing. I'm sorry, what? This world does introduce the penguin suit, which helps counteract these slippery ice patches by letting you walk and run normally across the ice. But when you become so reliant on certain power-ups, like in this case, it makes the experience without them torturous. It's also around this point where the methods required to collect each star coin look to incorporate the utility provided by these power-ups. This sees us freezing piranha plants to use as platforms, or even as surfboards as we ride on top of these cooligans. They may not be the most technically difficult maneuvers to pull off, but they certainly give players a taste of the challenges to come in later levels. Now, this penguin suit was so good that I forced myself to run back to the start from the checkpoint if I didn't have it, which ultimately did result in me dying a few times. Funnily enough, most of these deaths happened in the first few levels. Must have been incredibly rusty or something. After though, I locked in and breezed through the rest of the world without much trouble. Lemmy did humble me once after smacking his balls in my face, but apart from that, I eventually ended up squishing them as we moved on to the water world. Now, if the name of this world makes you shudder, then you're not alone. I absolutely hate water levels and platformers. Thankfully though, the water world in this game doesn't include much, well, water. And I'm not even kidding. There's only one level that has you swimming underwater for the majority of it. The rest just have water that you can kind of fall into if you're bad. To no one's surprise, I'm sure that one underwater level was the only one that gave me any trouble. I hate everything about bloopers, from their beady eyes to their pointed tips, and even the fact that they hide around as if I can't see them. Like, mate, you ain't John Cena. Outside of that though, there's not too much else to say. Like I expressed during my playthrough of New Super Mario Bros., water-based levels tend to include easier star coins, and this world is no different in that regard. The world finishes off with the first airship level of the game, which does throw a lot at you in terms of enemies and obstacles, but if you take your time and play it slow, it shouldn't be that hard to conquer, as the star coins are once again in very obvious spots. Defeating Bowser Jr. in what is a relatively easy fight grants us access to World 5. This world takes place in the jungle, and seems to test players' timing more than anything, as every level in this world incorporates elements that move. This sees the player paddling across the poisonous swamp while avoiding piranha plants, jumping across massive wigglers and using them to reach higher spots, and even jumping between fences as they rise and fall into the lava as Iggy constantly shoots fireballs at you. I will say that the auto scrollers aren't necessarily fast enough to pose any type of challenge, and while Iggy is a step up in terms of his attack patterns, he's still incredibly mundane. Well, if you know how to jump. Similar to its predecessors, it was around this point that I noticed a significant increase in the difficulty. The levels here don't exactly hold back, and you'll often find yourself in the middle of a billion bullet bills as you try to collect a star coin, or panicking as you try and find a hidden block that contains a vine to the third star coin, all while a porcupuffer hunts you down from the depths. The toughest level though would have to be World 6-6. It's essentially a culmination of every feature squashed into one level. For one, it's an auto-scroller that incorporates motion controls into its mechanics. The star coins are in locations that aren't even visible at first, and there are countless enemies that you have to pay attention to. You have to perform quite the juggling act here to get through the level with all the star coins. The castle stage is fairly simple, albeit for the one section that drops a whole lot of spiked balls on your face at once. Thankfully though, Morton is a joke, as is the airship level that follows him. It's funny how this world starts off fairly tough but ends on such an easy note, but maybe that was just my personal experience. Now I'm just gonna come out and say it. This world gave me PTSD. The first few levels are fairly simple, but a few of them have some awkward mechanics like having to swim while in the air. For the most part though, I breeze through most of them. Get it? Breeze through? We're in the sky? That breeze quickly turned into a storm though, as I subsequently lost my mind during the tower level. I can't tell you how many times I failed to get this third star coin. The idea is to throw up a bomb so it lands on the small ledge and blows up the bricks, which sounds pretty simple, right? Yeah, I thought so too. Until you realize the platform is constantly rising, giving you hardly any time to angle it properly. And even when you do, if you're not the exact distance from the bricks, your bomb is most likely going to bounce off the wall so that's not quite in the range to blow it up. Other times I just accidentally fall off myself all the way to the bottom, just to die to the copious amounts of bombs on the platforms as I was riding it back up to the star coin. There was even a time where I managed to get it, only to die to Ludwig in the most embarrassing way possible. There's no way that just happened. I must have died 5 or 6 times trying to get this damn thing, which is by far the most deaths I had experienced on one singular level so far. My descent into madness didn't stop there either. This is World 7-6, or as I've come to call it, Hell. This level is platforming in its purest form, as that's all this level involves. There's no obstacles, nor enemies, just a bunch of parabeetles that either fly upwards or crumble under your weight. The hard part is collecting the 3 star coins though, as they are in very specific spots that very few parabeetles can reach. This not only requires good timing, but also a line of thought that has you thinking about your future jumps, while taking into consideration the flight patterns of the beetles to come. Maybe I'm just bad, I don't know, but I must have died another 5 times or so trying to get all the star coins in this level. Thankfully, the castle stage and the boss fight against Ludwig were easy to complete. We've now arrived at the last story related world. Well, that's if you consider Peach being kidnapped for the 20th time a story by this point. Bowser's world is kind of a mixed bag to me. Sure, it has some tougher levels that require bomb throws, or dimly lit underwater levels that have fucking bloopers bouncing through them, which honestly doesn't even make any sense. I mean, how is there a water level in the middle of a volcano? Like what, is it a fucking hot spring or some shit? Regardless, there's also plenty of easy levels like World 8-2 and World 8-6, which have hardly any challenging sections to discuss. It feels like I'm playing 2 different worlds when I go from dodging a million cannonballs to a very basic castle stage that only has a few fire bars and some lava bubbles. We face off against Bowser one last time here in one of the coolest little chase sequences to date. And while it can be pretty tricky depending on his fireball placements, it never feels like you're under immense pressure. With Bowser defeated and Peach rescued, we're once again greeted by the credits. At this point I had earned 3 of the 5 golden stars, but there remained one final challenge. A world that was designed for the sole purpose of triggering you. No. Dude, stay frozen, you motherfucker! This is World 9, and don't let its colourful aesthetic fool you. The only thing to exist here is pain and suffering. None of these levels include checkpoints, meaning you have to complete them all without dying a single time. They also don't take on any particular theme. One time you'll be getting clapped by a porcupuffer just as you're about to reach the flagpole. and the next you'll be tearing your hair out as you desperately try to freeze this piranha plant so you can use it as a platform to get into this red pipe, all while your platform is descending into the depths as countless bombs swarm you. I shudder to even think back to these levels. And the thing is, I haven't even talked about the worst of them. This is World 9-7. This level is without a doubt the hardest one in the entire game, and one of the hardest in the entire sub-series. It takes place on icebox, meaning you're always sliding around, and if that wasn't bad enough, the copious amounts of fire-spitting piranha plants means that you only have a very limited amount of time to move through the level, as their fireballs slowly melt away the ice to reveal munches underneath. This level is already hard enough to complete, but it starts to get ridiculous when looking to collect all these star coins. The final two in particular are just cruel, as they're underneath the initial layer of ice, meaning you have to let them melt away before you have any chance of getting them. I died so many fucking times to this level that I essentially learned how to cheese it. I finished the level with only the first star coin, and from there I worked on each star coin separately. Completing the level meant that I could pause and quit just as I was about to die. This meant that I could keep any power-ups that I had active. Just to be clear though, I did still count instances where I quit as a death, but this third star coin is just brutal. You have to quickly take out these fireballs before they melt all the ice blocks, but at the same time there needs to be enough of them melted so you can slide down the wall here and then wall kick off and back onto the blocks above. Doing so is easier said than done, and I found that if I didn't have the perfect alignment of ice blocks above me, it was almost impossible to get back up. This level probably killed me over 15 times by itself, and there was no greater feeling of relief than when I finally completed it.
Finally! Finally! Oh my fucking... Oh...
After finally collecting all the star coins in World 9, all I had to do was find one last secret exit in World 2-4, which gave me the final golden star on my save file. At the end of New Super Mario Bros. Wii, I had died a total of 77 times. If we divide this by the game's 77 levels, this gives us a perfect 1 death per level statistic, meaning that for now, it is the hardest game to 100% out of the two we have played. Let's see if New Super Mario Bros. 2 can take that spot for itself though. To 100% New Super Mario Bros. 2, we will need to complete the main game while collecting all the star coins throughout. We also need to find all the hidden exits as well as open all the paths with the star coins. Finally, we will have to collect all the moon coins in the star world as well as get 1110 extra lives. As someone who has never played this game before, I honestly looked at that last objective and thought it sounded ridiculous. But as I soon learned, there was a significant byproduct of this objective existing, but we'll discuss that in a bit. Let's first dive into World 1 of this game. As you can imagine, this world posed no challenge whatsoever. This game acts as a direct sequel to the original New Super Mario Bros., meaning power-ups like the Mega Mushroom return for short spans of playtime. Other elements like World 1-2 always being underground stay consistent, and the levels for the most part are incredibly plain with very simple platforming. The world introduces the Super Leaf, which gives Mario another overpowered form as he can soar across the sky. This is used early on to collect a star coin here and there, but none of them are even remotely difficult to reach. But hey, this is the first world, so of course it's going to be easy. I get that. What I don't get is why I'm fighting fucking Resonors on a rotating wheel, and why it's the mini-boss in these tower stages. These guys constantly show up throughout the game at each tower level, and they never put up too much of a challenge. Their attacks hardly threaten you in the first place, and they're so easy to dispatch that they may as well have not existed at all. Ironically enough, the hardest part of this first world is the cannon stage, because unlike in previous games, the cannons don't automatically shoot you to the new world, instead requiring players to platform across increasingly difficult levels to reach the next world. Now I can't say this first cannon world is tough, but it is definitely a welcome change. The castle stage on the other hand has us facing off against Roy once more, and by this point these Koopalings are a joke. World 2, which believe it or not takes place in a desert, doesn't fare much better. Mario himself seems a lot less floaty in this game, meaning his jumps feel more precise and tactile. Maybe I had shaken off the rust by this point, but the platforming required in these levels seemed far more forgiving than in previous entries. There were a few tricky star coins present in this world, mainly ones that required you to use bombs to block bricks, or others that looked like glitches as you clipped through the ground. I did have my first death in this world once again, I mean what's new at this point, and that was mainly because I got tricked into thinking I could jump to the star coin from underneath, when in reality you're supposed to grab it with a Koopa shell. The tower levels still have these dumb rhinos as the mini-boss, and the fight against Iggy was just a rebrand of his fight in the original. Before we head on over into World 3, let's first have a look at World Mushroom. Now this world was unlocked by completing the first warp cannon we discussed earlier. These special worlds are interesting because they don't follow a set theme. You could be playing in underwater levels, you could be playing through desert levels, and then sky levels one after another. And while this does introduce some variety to the mix, none of the levels in this particular world were very hard. The hardest levels in this world are probably the secret stages. These secret levels have you sliding across ice as a constant stream of spiked balls rolls towards you, or act as auto-scrolls as you climb your way up some vines as chain chomps and Koopas try to knock you down. Even so, the only times I died in this world were to stupid mistakes, like trying to jump to the star coin without any vines to catch me. The castle stage tries to raise these stakes by introducing a spiked ball that chases you down constantly, but as you can see, I'm taking my sweet ass time, and that spiked ball isn't anywhere close to reaching me. Once again, the toughest level in this game is probably the cannon sprint, as there are quite a few enemies looking to stop you and there's very little room for error. Now this was the first world to give me some trouble, as it reintroduced the need to be Mini Mario again. It also included plenty of underwater levels, and you know how much I love underwater levels.
Dude, are you fucking serious? Dude, this fish won't get off me.
Raging aside, having to swim through the majority of the tower level as Mini Mario turned me into a nervous wreck, as I knew one mistake could finish me off. I will say though that New Super Mario Bros. 2 gives players far too many advantages. The coin block that shits out a bunch of coins also allows you to take an extra hit. So if we pair that with the ability to store a power up in your item slot, this means you can take up to 6 hits before dying if used optimally. That is a ridiculous amount of plot armor if you ask me. The warp cannon levels remain a consistent challenge and the boss battles consistently disappoint. Now personally, I thought World 4 put up hardly any challenge at all. I mean, it's an ice world, which means slippery physics and annoying enemies, but to my surprise this was one of the easiest worlds so far, which is definitely saying something. If we look back at the previous games, each one had unique enemies like the Snailcorns or the Cooligans. These enemies were agile and dashed towards you in an attempt to catch you off guard. The enemies presented in the ice levels in this game though are stationary piranha plants that you can just pick off from a distance. I guess you could argue the amps take this role in World 4-B, but even then they don't actively hunt you down, so there's no real pressure on the player. I think the secret exit in World 4-Tower perfectly sums up my thoughts on this. The tower stage in this world takes place on a platform that continuously moves upwards as enemies drop down onto it. Normally this level is a cakewalk as you're able to dispatch most of the enemies, but to grab the second star coin you need to play as Mini Mario. This means you can't dispatch any of the enemies really. Playing as Mini Mario on an auto-scrolling ice level with countless unkillable enemies sounds like a nightmare waiting to happen, right? And yet the fact that the enemies are these immobile bone piranha plants kills any sense of challenge. Now that warp cannon in World Mushroom leads to this next world, World Flower, and boy oh boy did I have fun in World Flower. That might have been the worst fight anyone's ever done here. Again, there's no central theme to this world. One minute I'm swinging across the jungle as Tarzan, and the next I'm getting more and more tilted as I try to bounce off some paratroopers as Mini Mario to get into this pipe. This section in particular can be fairly tricky as you need to bounce across multiple paratroopers as Mini Mario to get the third star coin. The majority of the levels in this world, however, are surprisingly easy. There aren't too many secret exits or scary star coins, and the only trouble I faced was during the warp cannon stage once again. Now, World 5 is, well, it's a world. And I honestly have nothing really to say about it. Again, my notes just say that pretty much everything was easy in it and that nothing exactly happened. I guess World 5-5 has a cool star coin that requires you to bounce off a bullet bill while avoiding the massive one above. World 5-1 has a somewhat tricky secret exit that sees you bouncing across multiple paratroopers. And I guess World 5-2 can be challenging as there are countless Lakitus trying to fuck you up. But I don't know, I only died twice in this whole world, which for the second last main world in the game is quite strange. World 6 is probably the first one to give us any semblance of challenge, which should be a given as it's the big bad Bowser world at the end of the game. Like its Wii counterpart, the world wastes no time with World 6-1 keeping you on your toes with a constant barrage of volcanic rocks, many of which you have to wait out as they destroy bricks granting you access to star coins. The star coins prove to be the hardest part of these levels, as many of them require you to do some tight platforming to reach them. Others require the same old bomb trick that you'd think I'd have the hang of by now, but for whatever reason, I can never get these on the first run through. The toughest yet coolest level in this world though would have to be World 6-B. This level has a cool gimmick that has you changing the direction of the platform by jumping on it. This means you need to carefully direct it towards each star coin while avoiding the copious amounts of bullet bills. It can get pretty dicey when the platform shifts directions after hitting another structure, and more often than not this meant instant death for me. Thankfully the game ends on a high point with one of the harder castle stages. This one in particular has multiple sections to it that see you dodging moving fire beams, riding snake blocks, and most importantly, avoiding the petrifying flash of the Koopalings. This becomes much harder to time when you're desperately trying to get these star coins as lava rises below you or the Koopalings look to petrify you in place. At the end of it all, we face off against Bowser in a relatively easy fight that essentially has you jumping from platform to platform while dodging Bowser's powerful swipes. With Peach in our arms, we run through the credits to reveal 2 golden stars on our save file. Looks like we still have quite a bit of work to do. Now while I say that, that isn't necessarily true, as 2 of the remaining 3 golden stars just involve us finishing this final world, World Star. Now if you thought this world was going to be the ultimate challenge like it was in Wii, then I'm sorry, but like me, you're going to be extremely disappointed. The levels present in World Star are embarrassingly easy for a final test. They have very obvious star coins, simple and forgiving platforming, and the same basic enemies from World 1. Honestly, you could switch the levels between the 2 worlds, and I wouldn't be able to tell the difference, at least not after the first few levels. I was somehow managing to get all 3 moon coins on my first runs through, and the only deaths I experienced were to lapses in judgment, when there were far more obvious methods to collect moon coins. I think there may have been 1 or 2 moon coins like the one in World Star 7 that required a decent amount of platforming skill, but even these weren't the worst of the worst. Thankfully the world ends with the hardest level in the entire game. It still uses the same petrify mechanic, but it ups the challenge tenfold as you're constantly on the move. Half the time you need to perfectly time your jumps to get behind the walls to avoid it. Having to grab star coins in this situation inevitably led to a few deaths. Bowser, who's now been melted down to his bones, puts up quite a fight himself, as his swipes are now much quicker than before. Pair this with Bowser turrets that shoot homing fireballs at you and you've got a decently challenging final boss. Now after finishing off Dry Bowser, all that was left was to get 1110 lives, which, I mean, it looks like it's going to take a while. At least that was the case until I discovered a technique so powerful, so ancient, that it's been hidden from the Mario community for centuries. And there it is, 5 golden stars on the save file, and goddamn, does it look sexy. At the end of Super Mario Bros. 2, I died a measly 28 times. Dividing this by the game's 81 levels leaves us with a 0.34 deaths per level statistic, meaning it is by far the easiest game in the series so far. We're on to the Dynamic Geo, and just to clear things up, I am playing on the Wii U iteration of these 2 games, and not the deluxe version. Not that I think there's any significant difference in terms of the content needed to 100% the game between them. To 100% New Super Mario Bros. U, we'll have to defeat Bowser, complete every level, get every star coin in the first 8 levels, as well as every star coin in Superstar Road. Finally, we'll have to catch Nabbit in the first 7 worlds, as well as find all 94 pole exits, which consists of 82 normal exits and 12 secret exits. Our journey starts in Acorn Plains, the typical grass-based world that's full of classic enemies. New additions include the Super Acorn power-up and the Yoshi variant, all of which make the earlier levels even easier as you can soar over most of the obstacles. Thankfully, this game switches out those paralyzed rhinos for Boom Boom, but let's be honest, he doesn't really do anything either. The Koopalings also make their triumphant return as the bosses in each castle, but in Lemmy's case, he's actually far easier this time around than he was in Wii, due to the fact that his arena no longer has any gaps to fall through. The game also has plenty of mini levels in its overworld that reward you with star power-ups. I will say I did actually die once in this world, and would you look at that, it's an underwater level. As is tradition by this point, we go from the grass world into the desert world. This world starts to require the use of power-ups to gather certain star coins. It also introduces another new minigame, as completing the first level in this world results in a short sequence where we see that Nabbit has stolen something from the Toad House. This is an extra objective that we need to complete in order to get a golden star, and all it involves is us chasing down Nabbits and levels that we have already completed. I sometimes wish he had his own unique levels, kind of like the warp cannons in Super Mario Bros. 2, but hey, at least these are fairly easy. A lot of the levels here are shrouded in darkness, which would be a decent challenge if the game didn't also introduce glowing Yoshi. This guy illuminates the whole screen, but more importantly he can stun enemies or outright eat them in their attacks. The only hard star coin in this world is probably in the secret level, as it's hidden at the end of a long line of ice blocks that are slowly melted away by these piranha plants. Outside of that though, the rest of the stages along with the boss fight against Morton are all fairly straightforward. From here we get to choose whether we want to go down into sparkling waters or up into the frosted glacier. I decided to go down towards sparkling waters because I just love water-based levels so much. Oh my god, I just fucking hate. In all seriousness though, this world certainly upped the difficulty in multiple ways. For one, most of the levels have you constantly avoiding enemies, whether that be flying Cheeps or multiple dragon eels. Certain star coins require you to damage boost through them, while others require Mini Mario to reach. The hardest star coin in this world is most likely the 3rd star coin in World 3. This one's a pain to even reach, as you need to either use a flight power up or get lucky like I did by bouncing off a Cheep to get into this pipe. You then have to quickly use this power block to have it drop and then grab it before the platform falls. fireballs. Even the castle stage has you spend a good portion of it underwater, and while I hate that, I can appreciate the fact that it stuck to the world's themes. Now while I had some troubles with sparkling waters, the same can't be said for the frosted glacier. On paper these worlds usually cause some trouble due to their slippery physics and annoying enemy types, but this iteration definitely fell short for one particular reason. This here is Bubble Yoshi, and just like his brothers, he is extremely overpowered, to the point where you can just spam his bubbles and completely wipe out any and all enemies in your way. Not only that, but these bubbles have a chance of turning enemies into power-ups, meaning you'll never be short of them. You can also use these bubbles as platforms to jump higher, allowing you to reach far higher than normal. This little guy essentially carried me through the whole world, and outside of a few stupid deaths in the castle stage where I can't even use Baby Yoshi, the rest of the levels here were a cakewalk. Even the ghost house, which got me to open up the wiki for the first time, because I mean how the fuck am I supposed to find anything in this maze, was a breeze because of this little Yoshi. From here we arrive in the jungle, but not before taking on this random airship level it's just here. This level is probably one of the harder ones so far, as it combines a lot of features into one. It's an auto-scroller with copious amounts of cannonballs being launched all over the place. It even has an underwater section with homing missiles that you need to direct into some bricks to grab this third star coin. It also ends off with a boss fight against Bowser Jr. We've now officially entered the jungle world, which is also the world with the most playable levels. And this world introduces some pretty annoying enemies like these brambles. I don't know what it is about these guys, maybe it's their goofy faces, but I always seem to let my guard down around them and get hit. Even the tower stages are starting to get hard, as they involve snake blocks that go off in different directions. You always need to be on the lookout to find star coins, all while avoiding the massive swinging balls. This level has some tricky star coins, but the worst of them all is once again up in the sky. Look, I get that these games are derivative of one another, but did they seriously have to bring back this cancerous Parabeetles level? You can probably guess that I once again struggled when looking to get all the star coins on this level, especially this third star coin. I just couldn't seem to get in this red fucking pipe. Now whether I was getting my ass blasted by a fish in the dark depths, or the ghosts in these stupid little minigames because I couldn't reach the star block because it was flying away in the distance and I can't get there, there's blocks, there's ghosts in the way, this world propped me up and it clapped my cheeks from start to finish. The ass blasting didn't stop as I made my way into Rocky Candy Mines. This world by far has some of the hardest star coins to collect. Now I don't have time to talk about all of them, otherwise we'd be here until the Switch 2 launches, but I do want to mention a few. One requires you to play through a whole tower stage as Mini Mario, which means you cannot be hit at all throughout the whole level. The third star coin in level 7 was also pretty difficult, as it involved me grabbing a shell from way back only to then dash my way over in record pace so I could throw it at this star coin. Even when you do eventually get it, you have to make sure you don't play like an idiot straight after. What am I doing? What up? Oh my god, what am I doing? The final one takes place at the end of the spine coaster, and this one tests your timing as you need to hit this block and get that star power up at the last minute. If done properly, you should still have your star power up when you get to these final blocks. Now if you do still have your star power up, then this block will provide another one, giving you just enough time to run across these munches and collect the final star coin. If your star power up runs out before you reach that block though, then it won't award you another star, making it impossible to grab that final star coin. From here we travel up into the clouds, as we dash through multiple athletic levels. These stages for the most part aren't too bad. There are a good few auto-scrollers that make it tricky to get all the star coins on the first run through though. Others just overload you with things to look out for, to the point where you forget to jump. The tower and castle stages are probably the hardest levels to 100%. They include some of the most annoying enemy types like fire bros or these ground pounding fat asses, and many of the star coins straight up troll you. Others require certain power-ups like the squirrel costume to reach, and with all the chaos going on, it's likely that you'll end up losing it and therefore stand around jumping for God knows how long. Mate, just give up. This world also marked the last time that we had to hunt down Nabbit. Now I haven't really mentioned these little mini levels with Nabbit as they're extremely easy to complete. I would just pop a star power up before going in and just rush him down without a care in the world as to any of the obstacles present in my way. The world ends with another airship level, but this time we have Bowser's big mechanical arm trying to crush us. This adds a layer of difficulty to the level as it not only keeps you on your toes, but it also destroys parts of the environment, limiting what you can actually platform across. The final fight against Bowser Jr. is certainly a step up from his tower appearances in the first game, but he's definitely not the hardest boss out there. Defeating him grants us access to Peach's castle, and despite this world having the fewest level, they're some of the hardest in the entire game. Even the very first level has an endless stream of fireballs. Wait, why does this look so familiar? The star coins in this level are fairly tricky and there were several close calls. It doesn't get any better from this point, as we find ourselves riding across a sea of lava with Monty moles swarming us or slowly ascending up a tower with lava rising below us as we get zapped by electricity. The first castle stage in particular had me sweating bullets as the platforms only allow one person on it. The moment any of these bombs drop on it, you have to quickly dispatch them all before the lava catches up. At the same time, you've got to dodge all these electricity bolts while maneuvering towards each star coin. This leads us to the final castle stage, which has Bowser Jr. constantly trying to slam us. Now I will say that the star coins present in this world aren't particularly challenging. Many of them are just out in the open in obvious spots, and while you have to make use of the environments and gimmicks to reach most of them, they aren't particularly hard to collect. Our final battle sees us facing off against the dynamic duo once again. All we need to do is avoid Bowser while we wait for Bowser Jr. to slam down in his pod. We then take control of it and use it to ground pound Bowser. The only tricky attack to avoid in this fight is Bowser's massive shell attack, as you need to predict when he's going to jump so you can quickly change directions and run under him. After our third ground pound, Bowser is down for the count and we once again rescue Peach. Following the credits, we're greeted to 3 golden stars on our save file, meaning we still have 2 to collect. Once again, we're faced with one final world, the ultimate test that is Superstar Road. The question is, does it live up to the hype? The levels start pretty easy with spine coaster stages and time-gated dash levels that require you to hit P-switches along the way, but they quickly become ruthless, requiring impeccable timing and near-perfect platforming. Essentially every level in this world has some pretty sketchy sections that you need to lock in for, otherwise you're getting humbled. This level here took me an ungodly number of attempts. This bucktooth ass hat is constantly on your ass, and if that wasn't bad enough, you need to make it through the whole level without taking a single hit, as you need a fire flower power up to break through these last 2 urchins to get the final star coin. If this fish chomps you, you die instantly as well. The hardest level, however, is fittingly the final, or at least appears to be the final level of this world. This level tests the player's timing, platforming, and reflexes all in one. The level itself is made up of swinging spiked balls that have a particular pattern to them. On their own, they wouldn't be too much of a problem, but when the ground beneath you is constantly at risk of falling, you hardly get any time to think. Pair this with incredibly tight jumps and star coins that require you to drop down only to jump back up, and you've got a solid challenge to round out the game. I must have died 6 or 7 times to this level, and it definitely got to me after a while. Alas, collecting all these star coins in the previous 8 levels unlocks one final stage, which is a complete joke. It's more of a puzzle level which requires you to throw Koopa shells around and then follow them in order to collect all these star coins. From here, I just needed to find 2 more secret exits, and with that I had 100%ed New Super Mario Bros. U. This game killed me 56 times. If we divide that by the 82 levels present in the game, we get a humble 0.68 deaths per level, which places it right around the middle of the pack. And with that, we're on to our final game. New Super Luigi U. Now, this game's interesting. Honestly, I'm not even sure if I should call this a game, as it's really just an expansion of New Super Mario Bros. U, but with Luigi. Look me in the eyes and answer this. Are these 2 different games?
No.
Whether you want to refer to it as a separate game or an expansion pack, it doesn't matter. What does matter is that there is another set of 80 plus levels that we have to 100%. And these ones aren't anything like the ones from Mario U. Well, I mean, they are, but you get what I mean. 100%ing this game means completing the same achievements from Mario U. This means we have to beat the main game, complete every level up to Peach's castle while collecting all these star coins in said levels. We then have to collect all 27 star coins in Superstar Road, as well as catch Nabbit once in the first 7 worlds and find all these secret exits. Our journey once again begins in Acorn Plains, and the first thing you'll notice is that we're playing as Luigi this time. Luigi can jump higher and can also hover for a little while after his jumps. In this sense, he makes reaching certain areas far easier, and his little hover ability has saved me more times than I can count. But hold on, doesn't that mean this game is going to be a complete cakewalk now? Well, my friends, you tell me, does this look like a cakewalk? Oh, what the fuck? Funnily enough, that's probably one of the easier levels. New Super Luigi U is somewhat of a double-edged sword. There are certain aspects like the fact that there are no checkpoints in the levels, or the fact that there is an absurd number of enemies placed within these levels that make the game challenging. If we were to compare levels in Acorn Plains between the 2 games, for example, I think you can see just how overkill some of these enemy placements are. This change affects levels throughout the entire game, and the 100-second time limit doesn't give you much time to consider your possible moves. On the bright side though, the 100-second time limit meant that they had to make levels much shorter, and the star coins had to be made far more obvious than in Mario U. Now the secret level in Acorn Plains would have been a pain, but thankfully the baby Yoshis return, and they remain overpowered. I did make some stupid mistakes during the castle stage, but apart from those errors, the rest of Acorn Plains wasn't that bad. Now because these levels went by so fast, I tended to abuse my power-ups more. See, another change added to Luigi U were the rewards given for completing these little minigames. In Mario U, you'd oftentimes get a star power-up, but in Luigi U, you're rewarded with propeller suits and super acorns. I personally think these are far better rewards as they allow you to completely soar over many of the added obstacles introduced in these levels. I honestly don't have too much to say about Layer Cake Island. The levels didn't feel particularly hard, and Luigi's abilities make traversing moving platforms a breeze as you don't even necessarily need to time your jumps that well. This also means that every boss is significantly easier as Luigi can jump far higher and hover over the top of their heads with ease. Now I've said this before and I'll say it again. I fucking hate underwater levels.
Dude, fuck these fish!
So I knew sparkling waters was going to be a pain in the ass. These levels were already torturous enough in the main game, so you can imagine how much pain I was going through when I had to swim around a billion fish or boos. Or these fuckers. Like, come on, these are fish. They have no business flying around up here in the sky. There's also these assholes that just pop out of nowhere just to munch your ass, and god, I just suck at these type of levels. Essentially everything in this game is just made to be faster. The levels are faster, the obstacles and dangers are rapid as fuck, and you yourself have to move faster as a result. This oftentimes leads to a lot of stupid mistakes where you're not even thinking properly as you try and rush through the levels. So, after another 10 deaths or so, we finally find ourselves in the Frosted Glacier. Now, before everyone starts thinking, oh here we go, slippery physics, Kai is gonna die another 20 times, I'll have you know that this world really wasn't that bad this time around. Again, we're blessed with the Bubble Yoshi, and he just absolutely claps Cooligans, whether that be his bubble spam or just straight up munching them. There are a few other levels that just play out by themselves, as you kind of just glide through them with the penguin suit without a care in the world. This type of design is carried over into the tower stages, and most of them you can dash through without missing any star coins. Outside of maybe the secret level that has you jumping from platform to platform while avoiding snowballs, the rest of the levels in this world didn't offer too much of a challenge. This air of calmness continued on into the jungle world, where it was smooth sailing for the most part. Luigi's floaty jumps are a game changer in many of these levels, as you're able to wait out the moving blocks. I will say that the hitboxes weren't exactly fair though.
What? Huh?
Okay.
Hold it. Run that back.
It's the biggest piece of dog shit.
These high jumps really do make a lot of the obstacles obsolete, to the point that this game feels easier than Mario U in some cases, and I was genuinely surprised at how fast I was breezing through these levels. That was until I came face to face with my arch nemesis. These levels are honestly my kryptonite, and you're probably thinking, well, with Luigi, it's got to be a cakewalk, right? In a sense, you are right, but these sadists decided to copy and paste piranha plants all over these parabeetles, so you can't even land on certain ones. As is tradition by this point, I died multiple times to this level trying to get all these star coins. I was so done with this level that I just ended up using a platinum acorn power up to just cheese through most of it. This little roadblock should have been a wake up call to stop playing for the day, because for whatever reason I began to fall apart. Maybe it was the fact that I had been playing new Super Mario Bros. Games back to back to back for the last 2 weeks, but I just spiraled to the point where I was dying to the dumbest things. None of the enemies encountered in Rocky Candy Mines were new, and I even had Bubble Yoshi with me for multiple levels. So can someone explain to me how I died 14 times in this world? Why am I jumping into these lightning attacks? Why am I struggling to catch Nabbit? Why am I getting decimated by this boss version of a sumo bro over and over and over again? So there I was, playing like an absolute wet wipe for an hour straight. Wow, I'm rubbish today, what? Sure, you could argue that the levels have definitely gotten tougher. The levels seem to have an immigration problem with all these piranha plants that keep appearing, but the design of the stages themselves don't seem all that different from the base game. I think I was just getting sick of playing the same game, repackaged for the 5th time by this point. Thankfully, after taking a break, my mediocre skills seemed to return as I quickly breezed through the first half of the Maringu Clouds. The star coins in these levels seem to fall into 2 main categories outside of the obvious ones. Some required the use of power-ups like the Ice Flower to freeze enemies and then use them as platforms, or the star to run over these munches, whereas others were locked behind a specific timer that required you to rush to its location before being squashed or locked out. Other levels just involve tight platforming with an absurd number of enemies swarming around you, but these aren't anything to sweat over by this point. The world ends with another airship stage that has us avoiding Bowser Jr.'s massive mechanical arm once again. Again, Luigi's jumping ability makes both the level itself as well as the fight against Bowser Jr. a cakewalk. Defeating him leads us once again into the final story stage of the game, Peach's Castle. Coming into this world, I was expecting an ass beating, and well, That's exactly what I got. The levels here don't mess around, whether it be another rainfall of constant fireballs falling on your head, or the need to move from side to side as you avoid lightning bolts. Everything is out to get you in these levels. The star coins in particular are some of the toughest ones so far, oftentimes requiring you to put yourself in immediate danger to collect them. The second star coin in level 2 took me an embarrassingly high number of attempts to get. The platform itself only moves when you have less than 5 objects on it. This counts coins as well as enemies. The problem is that the second star coin is in the lava below, meaning the only way to get it is by throwing a shell at it. Timing the shell throw is hard enough, but trying to avoid all the enemies while also making sure you keep a shell for the throw was far harder than it first seemed. Thankfully, the final castle stage and the boss battle weren't too torturous. I did die a few times trying to collect the third star coin, and that was mainly because I struggled to time my jumps off these falling platforms while Bowser Jr. hovered above me. After dealing with the dynamic duo one last time in a fight that for the most part is exactly the same as the base game, we're greeted with the final challenge. Superstar Road should realistically be called Remix Road, as the levels and even their central themes are recycled from Mario U. Level 1 has you riding a spine coaster, level 2 has you dashing across a level while hitting P switches, and level 6 has you avoiding massive firebars. Even the bloody names are essentially the same. If there was one thing that's changed about the levels in Luigi U, however, it'd be that they are significantly harder than their original counterparts. Even if we just look at the first few levels, the number of fuzzies you have to avoid here to get all these star coins requires some seriously quick reactions, and the speed at which you need to rush through and hit the P switches in level 2 essentially requires perfect play. This increase in difficulty is consistent across the majority of the levels present here, and many of them throw twice the number of enemies or obstacles your way. Ironically enough, the one level that I would say is easier is the final pendulum level, but don't get me wrong, I definitely died a few times while playing through it, but compared to the star coins in the pendulum castle iteration, the ones here are far easier to collect. Just like its predecessor, once we've collected every star coin in the 8 superstar levels, we unlock the 9th and final level. This level sees us slowly gliding down to the bottom as we slowly collect star coins. It's by far the easiest level in the entire world, and after collecting all 3 star coins in this level, we had unlocked that final golden star, putting an end to this whole experience. As you'd expect, Superstar Road pounded my ass, resulting in a total death count of 79. If we divide that by the 82 levels in the game, we get a concerning 0.96 deaths per level, meaning it was definitely one of the harder games to 100%. That being said, I think it's time to finally rank these games from easiest to hardest. The easiest New Super Mario Bros. Game to 100% is without a doubt New Super Mario Bros. 2, with an average of 0.34 deaths per level. From here we move on to New Super Mario Bros. U, which had an average deaths per level count of 0.68. The original New Super Mario Bros. Takes the middle spot with 0.69 deaths per level, meaning the 2 hardest games in the sub-series are New Super Luigi U with 0.96 deaths per level, and the hardest of them all is New Super Mario Bros. Wii with 1 death per level. Now these are by no means definitive rankings, and are more so what I find to be the most challenging. A lot of the reasoning behind Wii's difficulty stems from those insanely hard World 9 levels, whereas the ease of New Super Mario Bros. 2 stems from the fact that you can damage boost up to 6 times with all the benefits that they give you. But feel free to comment what you think the rankings should look like based on your own personal experiences and why. That's all from me this time. I hope you all have a great day, and I'm hoping to see you in the next one.